Dr. Bijna, welcome. Dr. Bijna is a reputed banker turned venture capitalist and entrepreneur who has over 20 years of professional experience serving at the world's most prestigious institutions. Dr. Bijna is also a strong advocate of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and has been featured in various publications, periodicals, interviews across geographies. Nick holds multiple businesses globally, brings experience extensively globally through capital raising and his commitment to ESG principles, as well as diversity and his track record in fostering a global entrepreneurship. Before we just get into the content, Dr. Bijna, please tell us a little bit more about yourself, because I don't think I did justice and I don't want to steal your thunder. So maybe a minute or so.
So thank you, Stephen, and hi, Nicholas. It's really nice to be here
Hello.
with both of you. Hi. Um, so my background is, as you said, sort of 20 years in capital markets, and then I have been focusing on venture capital, venture partnerships, and entrepreneurial activities for the last few years. From of Indian origin, from the UK, lived and worked in different parts of the world, and really that's where a lot of my focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, before it really became a thing like it is today, really started. So I was quite often the only ethnic minority person in the room, or the only female in the room as I got more senior in my career, the only person of color in the room quite often. And I experienced things which sort of helped me understand that there was an opportunity to do more to help educate others, because there was a need for provision for all different lenses of intersectionality that I was facing. And really that's sort of something that I've carried through my career. So it's a little bit about me, what I do, where I'm from, and why I'm passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Bijna. And Nick, tell us a little bit more about yourself, because again, I didn't do justice.
Thank you, Stephen, for the opportunity again to join this panel session today. I've got just a little over 26 years of global experience, primarily investment banking, ex-HSBC, Southeast Asia, Barclays, UK, worked in about 13 different countries doing so. So again, when it comes to the likes of ESG and diversity and inclusion, have definitely experienced it and witnessed it firsthand, as I also married into an Arabic family, and didn't find the response very favorable from the UK when certain people found out. So again, got to experience it in different ways, but certainly now here in Dubai, just about to go live with a VC. So very much VC and media hats on at the moment. And the VC is focusing within the specific fintech industry globally, and very much focused on diversity and inclusion and ESG within the financial markets as well.
Nick, thank you. Thank you so much. Look, our topic is very relevant these days, obstacles to opportunities around resilience, and it comes from individual right into business. But I'm going to ask Dr. Bijna, you've been a strong advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and diversity with a capital D here. How do you believe this contributes to overcoming business challenges and fostering innovation, not only in the sectors that you work with, like fintech and ventures, but across sectors? Anything you'd like to share there on that?
Interesting. Earlier today I was at a panel in Dubai talking about a very similar topic, but focusing on the fintech ecosystem. And really what I was saying there is that fintech isn't one ecosystem, it's a culmination of three. So fintech is typically financial services plus technology plus entrepreneurship. And there's a concept known as the triple glass ceiling, which actually exists in the fintech ecosystem, which in short, I can tell you, it means that there are less than 4% of all CEOs in the fintech ecosystem that are women. And there is a compound impact of the poor statistics that we have around D&I from a gender perspective in all three of those industries. My view of experience of 20 odd years is that there is definitely a lot more to be done. Will we achieve it in our lifetimes? Absolutely not. It's good that we're talking about it. But again, an example that I draw upon quite often is today, just today, 16th of May, 2024, there are 130 million girls on this planet that were not permitted to go to school today. So for as long as we are talking about diversity and inclusion, it's great. But if we're not taking action that correlates with that, and it's not that they can't go to school because they don't have the means, it's that they're not permitted for social, cultural, geopolitical reasons. I think that's alarming in itself, because it means that the next generation and the next generation are going to continue to live in a world where inequality is the basis and it's the status quo. The data really tells us that there's a huge case for DE&I from a P&L perspective. Organizations that have the top quartile of ethnic diverse employees, they have a 36% likelihood of financial outperformance. That's not me, that's according to LinkedIn. They also say that diverse companies earn 2.5 to 3 times higher cash flow per employee. Inclusive teams are over 35% more productive, and diverse teams actually make better decisions 87% of the time. So the fact that 3 of us are sitting here, for example, if we were a team, we would be that team that makes better decisions 87% of the time by nature of who we are. But that doesn't always exist in institutions or in geographies or even in industries. And I think, again, being conscious about decision-making when it comes to hiring, building teams, creating institutional culture, I think all of these things become really, really important.
It's an important aspect, right? Because it draws right into the heart of resilience and transcendence as well. And I say that, and I'll explain that. When we talk about adopting, we talked about awareness, and we might not be able to achieve everything in this generation, but from awareness to actual actions, and implementing that requires the leaders and the individuals to be courageous and to bring those agenda topics right to the front and put in actionable strategies. That takes a lot. That takes a lot from an individual. Do you agree, Dr. Bijna?
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think it goes back to, you may not always have all of the answers and you may not always have the roadmap, but I think if you can at least start with some basic principles for a process for developing inclusion, it can be just as simple as a commitment, right? For everyone, not just the leadership of the organizations, to be led by an EDI mindset, to have some evaluation and review and measure, to be asking people who are silent to exercise their voices, saying to people, what do you think? I want to know how you feel. Monitoring kind of existing practices, creating small, measurable, incremental development plans. I think all of these things can play into getting to the right answer and having an impact for the bigger picture. I think we can definitely start small, and we can all start with ourselves. One thing I always say is, understand yourself. What's your own intersectionality? And quite often people will say, what do you mean by intersectionality? Well, it's almost like your D&I kind of fingerprint, really, of who you are. What language do you speak? What ethnicity are you? What race are you? What gender are you? What country in the world do you originate from? How have you been influenced culturally? What does that mean? That's your intersectionality, right? And people quite often haven't identified their own. And then how do you expect somebody in the workplace to identify their colleagues or anyone around them? Start with yourself. Try and practice this with understanding who you are, and then see how that drip feeds into understanding how people around you are and what that means for a discussion that's healthy in the workplace and for a culture then that forms in the workplace. I think all of those things really add up.
Yeah. No, wonderful. And Nick, you've got a view. Please share with us, please.
Well, I think I certainly don't believe in coincidences, and this is unbelievably apt just today. So this morning at my son's school here in Dubai, it's getting ready for graduation. He's 10 years old, and in his class 5D, they did a presentation about technology, and there was space, and there was about climate change. And the one that is specific as to this particular conversation, gender equality. And it was three young girls, all 10 years old. One of them was local, one of them was from India, and the other one was from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And it's so specific to this conversation. And they were talking about how sometimes life is not fair because, and they said exactly what Dr. Bijna said about, they named a number of girls that around the world that do not have the rights as the same as their brothers do to be able to get to school, and how lucky they were and fortunate they were to be able to go to school. And I just think this is really apt. You know, they were talking about and the secondary director or leader was there. Sorry, and the teacher said, "Well, do you want to ask them any questions as you're about to move up to secondary school?" Still can't believe I'm saying those words. My son's moving up to secondary school, but and the one from Saudi, she said, and her name was Fatma. She said, "Yes, I'd like to ask a question. Will we get the same? Will we be equal as to the rest of the boys when we move up to the next year?" And that was, and you could hear everyone just go silent. And he went, "Unfortunately, no." And we were like, "Well, why? Why not?" And again, it's, we don't have enough time to go into it on this call, but you know, laws came into question, politics came into question. And again, you can't really go into that with a 10-year-old. It's only so far you can take that. But again, you know, it was like, yes, we do our best to make sure, you know, because she was like, "Well, we like football. We want to be able to play football. You know, we want to be, why isn't there a girls' basketball team?" So anyway, I just go off that tangent there, but I think this was really important.
Yeah, no, thanks, Nick, for that perspective. Let's talk about success here, sustainable success, and whether it's in venture capital, fintech, or any other type of business. Nick, let's just build on some of the experiences that you bring to the table as well. How do you think entrepreneurs or business leaders or individuals, how do you think they can better prepare to attract venture capital or investments that not only fuels initial growth, but also contributes to profitability, because that's a big word again in organizations, profitability and sustainability. How can we bring that success home? What are some of the ways in which entrepreneurs can adopt?
There's three things that come to my mind. Number one would be building a solid business plan.
Mm-hmm.
A clear, concise business plan, detailed, realistic plans that can really outline growth strategies and market understanding. Point two would be demonstrating traction, showing initial success, such as customer acquisition or even partnerships to validate a business model. Focus on long-term vision, highlighting how the venture will achieve sustainability and profitability, especially in today's world, in the long run, not just the short-term gains. I think too many entrepreneurs focus. I think that the very simple analogy that I would use at 6:45 in the evening would be, many entrepreneurs, in my experience, they look at the donut and not the whole.
Mm.
They really miss what's going. They're focusing on too much on the now. And again, it's easy for me to say, because what's the number one problem that most entrepreneurs face? And it's funding. And so you can be very short-sighted by that. But I think that if they can focus on those long-term goals, then I think really it will make a massive difference to the follow through for their business.
Yeah, that's true, Nick. And follow on to that, but with Dr. Bijna, when we talk about entrepreneurs and getting them prepared to to operate as an entrepreneur across different geographies, that might be different. You've experienced and you've worked with entrepreneurs, yourself included. in a global setting. Are there any geographic differences on how entrepreneurs build preparation related to sustainable success, whether it's from an investment right into execution and delivery?
I would say that cultural norms definitely have a role to play in tenacity and resilience. I think if you are coming from a country that has been challenged geopolitically or economically, you are aspiring and you are probably a little bit more thick-skinned because of what you've had to go through. I've got friends who've grown up in wars, and for them, entrepreneurial life is a breeze in comparison, right? They are of a mindset where they are determined and they will push through. And with the challenges that come with it, I think equally I've got friends and colleagues in parts of the world where they've had, straightforward education, go into a career, do well, make some money, think about plugging that into entrepreneurial life, and then find it's quite challenging. And again, that talks to their conditioning and their tolerance levels, which are different. And I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think it's about conditioning and what you're sort of, willing to kind of plow through. The fact is that 90% of startups do fail. And 70% of those fail kind of in the first couple of years, 30% fail in the first year itself. Regardless of industry or sector, startup failure rates seem to be the same across the board. And the number one reason, according to CB Insights, as to why startups fail is misreading the market demand. That's almost half of all cases. I think ultimately, as someone who sits on the ICs and advisory boards of different funds, a couple of things I really look for is really the qualities of the leadership team, the palette of the leadership team. Who are they? Where have they come from? What have they been through? Are they going to be able to deal with the reality of going through the mill that being a startup really requires? Are they going to be able to face the storm together, collectively and individually? If there is market turbulence, if there is political turbulence, if there is turbulence in their industry, what have they done previously and where have they done it? Doing it in the four walls of, let's say, large-scale investment bank, for example, that's very different to being out on your own in the cold and not knowing where your next round of funding is going to come from or how you're going to pay the next set of salaries for your team. And I think mindset, attitude, a value system, those are things that increasingly we tend to like to look at, because for me, that qualitative aspect is as important as the quantitative aspect. You could have all the money in the world, but if you're not going to be diligent in your decision making, it means nothing.
Yeah, it's a good segue to what I was going to just describe in terms of leadership practices. And just work with me on this one here. In my view, there is the institution of a corporate, whether it's a startup or it's a medium size or an established organization. You've got a collective of people that are sitting there against a set of values and so forth. But ultimately, it also comes down to the individual that comes to the table and the level of emotional intelligence or the curiosity that they bring to the table as well. How do you bring that intersectionality around the individual and that individual's values or emotional intelligence, the curiosity into the business? What kind of styles are you seeing that would be needed? Is there like a one particular style, or is there something that needs to be very much broadened based on the environment? Dr. Bijna?
So my measure is quite often around EQ. The World Economic Forum reported in 2015 that, by 2025, almost 70% of all tasks in all types of jobs as we know them will be automated or semi-automated to some extent. The commodity there becomes EQ. So I don't think experience or technical competency alone can make a startup successful. I'm privileged to be working with a lot of different startups in different parts of the world as a venture partner. And I sit on the boards of different companies. And what I see there is somebody that has a very good technical competency or a very good industry kind of competency because of how they've been conditioned for 10, 15, 20 years. That's great, but that's not the same. Doing something around a product or a service in isolation, day in, day out, is not the same as scaling it, monetizing it, building teams around it, and actually servicing the market with it. And so I think if you have entrepreneurial passion, you have strategic vision, that makes you successful. And if you don't have that, that's okay. But are you bringing in team members that have strong soft skills? And Harvard Business Review did a study on this as well. And they also kind of endorsed that the teams that have this palette of soft skills, they're the ones that succeed. Almost 1/4 of startups fail because of team issues or gaps in skills that teams have, because you may have, let's say, a bunch of data scientists who are brilliant data scientists, but they don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of, in your first couple of years, you've got to spend 40% of your time doing all the administrative tasks, right? And they don't want to do it. They're not interested. They don't know how to do it. And obviously they're going to fail because they are just going to be data scientists. They're not going to be entrepreneurs. And I think, again, you need someone that comes in and complements the business with those skills. And I think there are leaders and managers, there are technically competent people, and then there are people who are good with the entrepreneurial and strategic side of things. And I think you need both to succeed. And at least the successful businesses that I see and serve have that blend in some capacity. May not always be 50-50, but they have the acknowledgement that we need this. It's important. Whether it's building an advisory board, whether it's building, a small team of trusted advisors, it's important.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dr. Bijna. But Nick, any thoughts to build on what Dr. Bijna mentioned?
How am I supposed to top that?
I
know. I just like, yes, I agree. I would do my best to complement it. I think, look, from my perspective, strong leadership styles is definitely very, very key there. I think the most effective leadership styles in venture capital are those that balance vision and practicality. And I say, look, visionary leaders inspire and drive innovation, while pragmatic leaders focus on execution and managing risks.
Yeah.
Two very, very differences there, massive differences. Both styles are essential for success. And success factors is a combination of strategic thinking, resilience, like Dr. Bishop's already said, and the ability to inspire and lead diverse teams. That's what makes VC leaders and entrepreneurs successful.
Yeah, no, thanks, Nick, for that. We'll be wrapping up in a few minutes here. I wanted to request your further insights, Nick and Bijna, about cultivating leadership and a resilient mindset. The broader theme around today was obstacles to opportunities, and resilience is not just about a touchy-feeling piece. It's the tangible aspects which leads to productivity, to profitable growth, and so forth. With your expertise in cultivating resilience and how you actually bring and grow other leaders as well, that ownership mindset is a very critical aspect as well. Any quick set of strategies, 2 to 3, that you would like to share, Nick, and then we'll move on to Dr. Bijna as well.
Sure. I mean, I can, but my main 3 would be: set clear goals, establish clear, achievable goals that align with your long-term vision, stay agile, be willing to pivot. That's the important word. Be willing to pivot and adapt your strategies in response to market feedback and market changes. Ones that are not willing to pivot are part of that 90% that fail. And I think my third one is cultivate a growth mindset, like we've just been talking about. Focus on growth and continuous improvement for yourself and your team.
Yeah, that's huge, Nick, and very relevant. Dr. Bijna, tell us some practical strategies from your side.
Yeah, so all of the ones that Nicholas talked about, and a couple more. I actually really like to understand the people that I work with, and I think what I really get excited about is when I see someone that's navigated something in their life that perhaps isn't plain sailing, because it teaches me how they act when when kind of things get challenging. It tells me a lot about their value system. I'm someone who looks for integrity. I mean, everyone has integrity when you're being watched, but very few people have integrity when no one's watching. So I think building teams with high integrity is important. Building teams is important. I definitely love to and get very excited about hiring and partnering with people who are bringing different experience and different ways of thinking to the table. I think if you're the smartest person in the room, I totally agree that you're in the wrong room. And I think that excites me as well. And also in terms of growth, right? I think if you're trying to hoard everything for yourself or for a select few people, you're stagnating yourself. You're limiting the art of the possible. I think a bigger slice of a bigger pie and contribution, not competition, tend to work well for me. And I think the most valuable thing that you can do as a founder is understand that if you can build an ecosystem where everyone has room to grow, everyone is happy to take an aspect of the opportunity but contribute towards it, and that you also have your own downfalls and blind spots, and it's important to keep people around you who are your alter egos to some extent, and they're probably the polar opposite of you in many ways, but they can bring out and complement the strengths that you have with their own. I think all of those things for me make it, time well spent.
Yeah, no, wonderful, Dr. Bijna and Nick. It's been very insightful the last 30 minutes just to hear those unique perspectives, but yet there was a lot of convergence as well. So it's all within that theme of resilience and transcendence, but from an individual to an organization perspective and an entrepreneurial perspective as well. Dr. Bijna and Nick, thank you so much for being with us today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Audience has been has benefited from your unique insights. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you for having us.
All right, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.